I'm very honored to be taking part in this symposium organized by Global Minnesota for the International Day of Education. And I'd like to start by thanking its president, Mark Ritchie. Like Global Minnesota, UNESCO was founded on an ideal to promote education as one of the common goods of humanity. Because education is not only a basic right enshrined in Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is also an essential lever to respond to the challenges facing our world. And yet, in recent months, this right has been called into question like never before, maybe. A series of crises has emerged, which we must rise above together. A health, educational, economic crisis, a social crisis marked by rising inequalities and discrimination, an environmental crisis, a crisis of confidence in science and in the facts. After a year as difficult as 2020, being pessimistic would be easy. But 2021 gives us many reasons to hope. Because, as the past year has shown us so painfully, education is a human right, a public good, and a public responsibility, as the theme of this symposium reminds us. As you know, at the peak of the pandemic, our figures have shown that 91% of the global student population, 1.5 billion learners, were unable to attend school. Together, we saw the gap that is left in our lives and in the lives of our children. Not only in the field of learning, of course, but as well in terms of cultural, social vocations, in terms of physical and mental health of our children. It is at school that we learn to live in society. It is at school that children receive attention and meals. Schools are also a place where girls and women receive sanctuary from violence. It is estimated that in 2020 there could be an additional 1 million forced pregnancies around the world. At a time when 11 million girls may never return to class, in addition to the 130 million who were already out of school before the pandemic, the danger is clear. Yes, 2020 was a year of disruption, but it was also a year of mobilization. As early as March, over 160 partners, international organizations like the World Health Organization, the World Bank, major companies and education actors joined forces as part of the Global Education Coalition launched by UNESCO. I would like to thank all the US companies that joined this movement: IBM, Google, Microsoft, Uber, Verizon, and Facebook. Thanks to all our partners, the coalition and UNESCO supported the continuity of learning and the reopening of schools in over 70 countries, benefiting millions of pupils and teachers. Firstly, we took action on the educational front to ensure that learning could continue. But we also took action on the health front by organizing the sharing of best practices. This joint action showed us that when education actors all stand together, they are a very powerful force. This is true in emergency situations, but it is also true for long-term challenges. Against racism, against anti-Semitism, against discrimination and social injustice, education is our best ally. Respect for others, acceptance of difference, fight against racism, this can be taught, and I know how committed Global Minnesota is in this field. In addition to our campaign United Against Racism, which has been viewed hundreds of thousands of times, UNESCO has launched a series of masterclasses to fight racism and discrimination, training thousands of students and teachers around the world. Education is also a very powerful lever to combat global warming and the collapse of biodiversity. This is why we encourage dialogue between our member states and support the sharing of good teaching practices in this field. In May, we will present the best global initiatives in terms of education for environment at the UNESCO World Conference on Education for Sustainable Development in Berlin. Education is also essential in developing critical thinking, in debunking fake news and conspiracy theories, in using social media without being controlled by it. This is why UNESCO has integrated recent technological innovations, including algorithm, into media and information literacy programs. In April, we will officially launch this program for countries to support them in teaching these skills, which are more and more necessary. As all of these issues show, education should not be considered a cost, but an investment, and one of the most important investments there are. Yet, the funding that has been committed to education is insufficient and threatened by the current situation. According to our calculations, education budgets in low and medium-income countries could drop up to $200 billion per year because of COVID-19, 40% of the sum needed annually to achieve the United Nations goal for 2030 in education. We need more investment, and we need it now. Recovery plans are a window of opportunity in this respect, and one we should not miss. This was the message sent by over 70 heads of state and governments and ministers at the Global Education Meeting organized by UNESCO last October. They recommitted to allocating between 15 and 20% of public spending to education and increasing international aid for education. We also need to invest better, because the pandemic has underlined the importance of ensuring that education reflects the time so it can respond to the challenges of our time, climate change, technological revolution, or prejudice. This is why we've also launched, as part of our initiative on the futures of education, a global conversation on tomorrow's education. Nearly 1 million educators, learners, parents, citizens have already contributed to these reflections, which will be presented in a report published later this year, with the support of the President of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Sahle-Work Zewde, who chairs this International Commission for the Futures of Education. The Commission will focus on the lessons to be learned from this period, and especially on the importance of distance learning. Because the last few months have shown the advantages but also the limitations of an all-digital or all-distance learning approach. As we've seen, learners need to interact with their teachers. Effective education requires face-to-face contact. This is why teachers and educators are so central to school systems. We must give them more, not less, resources, more training and more consideration. And indeed, the countries that have best responded to the learning disruptions of 2020 are those where teachers are better qualified, better trained, and better considered. Because school systems depend first and foremost on teachers, UNESCO works with countries and partners to make them central to our social projects. They are the best possible investment for the health, for the development of our societies. All of these discussions, all of these issues impacting the future of education guide our work and our reflections every day in the field, along with UNESCO's member states. We invite each and every one of you to take a seat at this table, the table of multilateralism, because we need all of you on board. Only in this way, UNESCO and the United States will be able to achieve the ideal of Archibald Mike Leach, the American poet and librarian of Congress, who said, and I quote, "Of course, we can educate for world peace. I'd be willing to go a great deal farther than that. I'd be willing, for my own part, to say that there is no possible way of getting world peace except through education." And with his words, I conclude. Thank you very much.